A young widow, carrying the weight of both grief and an unborn child, steps outside her creaking ranch house to bring in firewood, and hears a sound that stills her breath, a low groan carried on the wind. The world around her is frozen silent, the kind of cold that steals feeling from the hands and hope from the heart. Yet something deeper pushes her forward. She follows the faint marks in the snow until she finds him. A man collapsed near her fence line, half buried in white, his skin blue, and his breathing shallow, as if each inhale is a battle he is already losing. Fear flickers through her. She is alone, vulnerable, and struggling to keep her ranch alive after her husband's death. But compassion wins. She kneels beside the stranger, feeling the tremble in his body, and whispers, "Please hold on," though she doesn't know if he can hear her. With every ounce of strength, she holds him up, the weight nearly knocking her to her knees, and drags him toward the glow of her cabin. Snow lashes at her face, her arms burn, and her child kicks painfully inside her, yet she refuses to stop. By the time she reaches the door, she is breathless and shaking. She gets him onto her bed, strips off his frozen coat, and builds the fire higher until warmth fills the room. She presses a warm cloth to his forehead, holds his hand when it twitches with pain, and speaks to him softly in the dim light, anything to anchor him to this world. She doesn't know his name, doesn't know if he is dangerous, and certainly doesn't know why her heart aches at the thought of him dying alone. All she knows is this: no one should be left to freeze in the dark, not while she still has breath to give. As the storm rages outside and her cabin becomes a fragile island of heat in a land of ice, Elena finds herself watching the stranger's chest rise and fall, praying it doesn't stop. In that moment she has no idea that saving this dying man will change everything she believes about her future. And her heart begins with the stranger drifting in and out of consciousness, his breaths ragged and uneven, as Elena sits beside him through the long night, refusing to leave his side even when exhaustion makes her vision blur. With every fevered twitch he makes, she feels a protective instinct rise in her chest, as fierce as the winter wind outside. When dawn finally breaks through the frosted window, the light reveals the toll the night has taken on her, dark circles under her eyes, trembling hands and a stiffness in her back from leaning over him for hours. But instead of resting, she brings him warm broth and coaxes him to sip it. His eyes flutter open for mere seconds at a time, revealing a startling depth of pain and gratitude before they close again. He manages no name, no explanation, not even a whisper, and yet something in his expression makes her feel as though he is clinging to her voice like a lifeline. She speaks to him gently as she works, telling him the simplest things: when the fire needs tending, when she is heating water, when she's stepping outside to gather snow to melt because the silence feels too much like danger. As his fever builds, she places cool cloths on his forehead and wipes the sweat from his temples, murmuring reassurances meant as much for herself as for him. Her unborn child shifts inside her, reminding her of how close she lives to the edge of survival. Yet she cannot bring herself to regret taking this stranger in. Kindness is the last thing she feels she has to offer the world, and she will not surrender it. Throughout the day, his strength flickers like a candle in a storm, sometimes steadying, sometimes weakening so severely she fears he might slip away between breaths. When he finally opens his eyes fully and meets her gaze really, sees her, there is something in his look that makes her chest tighten. A quiet plea mixed with a fragile trust. He doesn't tell her who he is or where he came from. He simply watches her with a softness she doesn't expect, as though he's silently promising that her care is not in vain. Elena doesn't understand why saving this nameless man feels so important, but as she changes the cloth on his brow once more, she begins to sense that he carries secrets deeper than his wounds, and that her life, without realizing it, is already changing. "You, sir." As the days pass, Caleb's strength returns in slow, fragile increments, allowing a quiet rhythm to settle between him and Alana, one built, not on conversation, but on the soft exchanges of gratitude, glances, and unspoken understanding. The first morning he stands without her support, he nearly collapses again, and Alina instinctively reaches out, her hand steadying the small of his back. The brief touch sends a surprising warmth through both of them, though neither speaks of it. He insists on helping her with chores, his voice still rough, his movements still labored, yet determined, as if repaying her kindness matters more than regaining his own health. Elena watches him mend the fence line with careful, deliberate motions, noticing how his hands, scarred, calloused, and strong, handle every task with a gentleness she hadn't expected from a man built like him. She brings him water and small meals. But he always thanks her with a look more tender than the words he cannot quite form. In return, he observes her with a quiet attentiveness. The way she braces her back when her child shifts, the way she pushes her hair behind her ear when she concentrates, the way sorrow flickers across her face when she thinks no one is watching. Their conversations remain sparse, yet somehow their silence speaks more clearly than words. Sitting at the small kitchen table in the evenings, sharing simple food warmed over the stove, they begin to feel the weight of loneliness ease from their shoulders. Alina finds herself listening for his footsteps around the ranch, reassured by the presence she once feared. Caleb finds himself repairing things that don't truly need fixing, simply for the excuse to stay close to the woman who risked everything for him without asking a single question. There are moments when their eyes meet and linger, just a second to long moments. Thick with an emotion neither of them is ready to name. Though he still offers no details about his past, no hint of the life he fled, Alina feels a strange certainty settle inside her. This man, broken and mysterious as he is, was meant to cross her path. And as the winter air softens just enough to hint at spring, they both begin to sense that something tender, something healing, is quietly blooming between them. Even if neither dares to acknowledge it aloud, unfolds beneath a sky heavy with winter clouds, as Caleb grows stronger in body but increasingly conflicted in spirit, haunted by the secret he carries and terrified of how it might change everything between him and Alina. Each day he watches her move through the ranch lifting water buckets with quiet determination, rubbing her aching back, tending the fire with hands roughened by loss and survival, and something inside him softens in a way he hasn't allowed in years. He knows he should leave. The men who ambushed him will return, and staying here risks bringing danger straight to her doorstep. But every time he sees her smile, even the small, tired ones, something inside him anchors deeper into her world. At night, lying awake on the old cot she gave him, he stares at the ceiling and battles with himself. He is not a simple drifter, not a nameless wanderer she found in the snow. He is Caleb Warwick, heir to the sprawling Warwick ranching empire, the unseen owner of nearly every grazing field, cattle route, and ranching territory in Wyoming. A man whose wealth could rebuild her ranch 10 times over. A man whose power stirs envy and danger in equal measure. He knows that if Alina learned the truth, she might look at him differently, see him as another powerful man, rather than the wounded stranger she chose to save. And that thought terrifies him more than the men hunting him ever could. Meanwhile, Alina senses his restlessness, the way his gaze drifts to the horizon, as if expecting nightmares to rise over the hills. But she mistakes it for a desire to leave, to return to a life somewhere far from her lonely ranch. The idea tightens around her heart like a cold fist, though she hides it behind gentle smiles and careful distance. Caleb sees the sadness she tries to hide, and it only deepens his guilt. Every unspoken truth feels like a betrayal of the woman who gave him warmth when the world turned its back. Torn between protecting her with silence and protecting her with honesty, he finds himself trapped in a storm of his own making, one that grows heavier every time her eyes meet his, with trust he feels unworthy of. And though neither says a word, the tension between truth and affection begins to build, quiet but powerful, like winter thunder rumbling beneath the earth. "You said," begins with a blizzard sweeping down from the mountains like a living beast, trapping Alina and Caleb inside the small ranch house for 3 long, breathless days that test both their strength and the fragile bond forming between them. With the wind clawing at the walls and snow piling high against the windows, the world shrinks to the warm glow of the fireplace and the soft rhythm of 2 people who have no choice but to share the same fragile space. In that forced nearness, Alina's guarded heart begins to crack open. She finds herself talking more than she ever intended telling. Caleb about the husband she buried too young, the crushing debts that swallowed the ranch, and the fear that keeps her awake at night as she wonders whether she can raise a child alone. She admits how grief sometimes feels like an old blanket she can't take off, heavy and suffocating. Caleb listens with an intensity that steals her breath. He says little, but the tenderness in his eyes makes her feel seen for the first time in years. When she fights tears, he quietly looks away, not out of discomfort, but out of his own aching empathy, as if her pain strikes too close to wounds he has never confessed. At night, the house grows colder, and they sit closer to the fire, their hands brushing now and then, sending tiny sparks of warmth through the silence. The storm outside rages in violent, howling gusts, but inside, another kind of storm brews, one made of longing, fear, and unspoken truths. Caleb wants to tell her everything. Who he really is, why he was attacked, how he is no simple ranch hand, but a man with power and enemies that could destroy everything she has left. Yet every time the words rise in his throat, he bites them back, terrified that the truth will break the fragile trust growing between them. Meanwhile, Elena feels her heart pulling toward him with a quiet desperation she doesn't dare name, knowing how dangerous hope can be. The storm finally begins to ease on the morning of the third day, but neither of them steps outside. The world may be thawing, but the emotions between them raw, fragile, inevitable are only beginning to take shape, settling deep in the spaces where loneliness once lived. Erupts into danger the moment the quiet morning calm fractures beneath the sound of approaching horses, heavy, purposeful, and wrong in every way, and Caleb's blood runs cold because he recognizes the rhythm of those hooves as surely as he recognizes the scars on his own hands. He barely has time to react before Elena steps onto the porch, confused but steady, her hand resting on her swollen belly as she peers across the snow-covered yard. When Caleb grabs her arm and whispers, "Go inside." Now, she senses the fear in his voice, a fear deeper than anything she has seen in him before, and her heart twists. But it's already too late. 3 men ride into the yard, their faces hardened by greed and violence, their eyes locking onto Caleb with murderous intent. Elena acts on instinct, pulling Caleb toward the cellar door behind the kitchen, whispering for him to hide, risking her life without hesitation. Caleb wants to refuse, wants to protect her instead, but the urgency in her trembling voice forces him to obey. From the darkness of the cellar, he listens helplessly as the men shove their way into the house, demanding to know where he is, tearing through her home with callous hands. When one of them grabs Elena's arm and she stumbles, crying out softly as pain shoots through her belly, something inside Caleb snaps with a fury he hasn't felt in years. He bursts from the cellar like a man possessed, fighting with the desperation of someone who has everything to lose. The struggle is vicious, blood splattering across the wooden floor, fists crashing against bone, the sound of shattered furniture echoing through the cabin. But Caleb moves with a strength, born of sheer terror, for Elena's safety. He defeats the men one by one, until the last of them falls into the snow outside, groaning and defeated. But victory brings no peace. With blood on his hands and Elena trembling in the corner, he finally understands that the truth can't stay buried any longer. The men weren't after a drifter, they were hunting Caleb Warwick, the man who owns nearly every ranching territory in Wyoming, and the fortune that comes with it. And as Elena looks at him with shock, fear, and a heartbreak he never wanted to cause, Caleb realizes that the danger he carried into her home is nothing compared to the pain of losing the trust she gave him so freely. Unfolds in the heavy silence that follows the fight. A silence so thick, Elena feels it settle into her chest as she watches Caleb slump against the wall, blood dripping from a cut above his brow, his breath ragged and guilt-ridden. She wants to rush to him, to tend to his wounds the way she has before. But something stops her, the weight of what those men said, the truth she heard in their threats. When she finally asks who he really is, her voice cracks, soft but trembling with hurt. Caleb doesn't look away this time. Exhausted, defeated, he tells her everything. His full name, Caleb Warwick, the Fortune. He never wanted the empire he was born into but never felt he deserved, and the men who hunted him for control of the land he inherited. As the words spill out, his eyes darken with shame, as though every truth is another stone placed at her feet. Elena stands frozen, the pieces clattering into place as refined manners, his scars, the way he watched the horizon like a man carrying more than memories. She thought she brought a dying stranger into her home. Instead, she sheltered a man who could buy and sell her entire life with a signature. Her heart twists painfully, not because he is wealthy but because he didn't trust her with the truth. Because he looked into her eyes day after day and let her believe she had rescued someone ordinary, someone who might stay. Caleb sees the hurt in her silence, and it wounds him deeper than the blows he took that morning. With a voice frayed by fear, he whispers that she was the first person who saw him as a man, not a name, not a fortune, not a legacy, and he couldn't bear to lose that. He tells her that her kindness was the first real thing he'd felt in years, that the warmth she offered was something money could never buy. Elena's throat tightens, torn between understanding and heartbreak, between gratitude for his honesty and sorrow for the deception that lingered too long. She doesn't know what to say, doesn't know if she can trust him again. But she knows one thing with painful clarity: nothing about her quiet, fragile world will ever be the same now that she knows who Caleb truly is, and how deeply he has come to care for her, begins with dawn breaking soft and pale across the ranch. The storm finally gone, but leaving behind a different kind of quiet one, filled with the heavy weight of the truth that sits between Alina and Caleb like a living thing. Caleb, bruised and bleeding, moves through the house with slow, deliberate motions as he gathers his coat and the few belongings he came with. He believes she wants him gone. Her silence feels like a verdict he has no right to argue with. Every step toward the door feels like tearing out a piece of himself, but he forces his hands to keep moving because the last thing he wants is to cause her more pain by staying where he is no longer welcome. Alina watches him from the kitchen doorway, her heart pounding in her throat as she takes in the exhaustion carved into his face, the slump of his shoulders, the way he winces each time he breathes. She remembers the man she dragged from the snow, the man who fixed her fence with careful hands, who listened to her stories with eyes full of quiet understanding, who fought for her without hesitation. Wealth or no wealth, he is still that man. But trust is a fragile thing, and hers has been cracked, not shattered. When Caleb finally steps onto the porch, snow crunching under his boots, he pauses as if giving himself one last chance to hope, but he doesn't turn around. It is Alina who calls his name, her voice trembling but sure, and the way Caleb freezes tells her just how desperately he wanted to hear it. She moves toward him slowly, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the doorframe for balance, and tells him, softly, that he doesn't have to leave, not if he truly wants to stay. The relief that floods his face is so raw and vulnerable it nearly steals her breath. He steps closer, cautiously, as though afraid she might change her mind, but she doesn't. She meets his gaze and sees not the heir to a ranching empire, not a man with wealth beyond imagination, but the wounded soul she took in on a freezing night, the man whose presence has quietly filled the empty spaces in her life. And when she takes his hand in hers, something inside both of them settles into place, warm and certain. Her kindness saved him once, but now, as the sun rises over the snow-washed world, it is his love, and the future they might build together, that begins to save her in return.